Brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Behaviour Revolution Scriptures. It's all about behaviour, guys. What is the point of reading the Torah, the Scriptures, the living words of Yahusha, and putting them into us if there's not an output? And the output, our worship, our lifestyle, our behaviour, has to shine, doesn't it? Our words, we need to know what we're talking about if somebody asks, but I mean, who asks these days? The most important thing is our behaviour. We need to behave as Yahusha wants us to behave, because that's our worship these days. And we know that. That's why I'm going through these scriptures and just tweaking things and making it more user-friendly for the 21st century generation, for my kids, for old people, young people, everybody, so they can pick it up and not feel like they need to, study Hebrew or learn Shakespeare or, all this stuff that's going on. I just want it to be an easy read. Not because the walk is easy, but because if Yahusha was talking to us today, he wouldn't be talking like this. The instructions would be the same, but he wouldn't be saying it in the same way, because languages have changed, translations and things have changed over the last 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years. So the whole seed thought of this is, if Yahusha was standing in a room with us, telling us stuff, how would it sound? He'd be using metaphors and shadows and ideas and illustrations that relate to us today. So while I'm keeping the essence and the instructions, of course, the instructions of the blood covenant, because that's where we find our deliverance, isn't it? Through the blood of Yahusha. That's the project that I'm undertaking. And we're coming to the end of the first book of Genesis. Genesis? Bereshith. Coming to the end of Bereshith. And it's been an amazing journey. I mean, I'm seeing that it all started with a covenant home, a perfect covenant garden, protected love, instructions for Yahusha's bride, his people, his family. He created us to have a family, not a bunch of servants or robots or things like that. He wanted a family to interact with, someone who would have thoughts and opinions and talk to him, converse with him, relate to him, but who would also live under his instructions, because his instructions are not cruel. It's like telling a child, don't put your hand on the stove. Oh, that's a bit of a harsh instruction. No, it's for the child's benefit, not ours. It's so that they don't burn their hand off. That's all. Yahusha's instructions are for our benefit, and they show who he is in his perfection. And that's what I'm realizing going into, and I've uploaded it now, 𝗪𝗪 Exodus, on the Behaviour Revolution site if you want to start reading it. The thing I've learned about going through all that is, it's not that Yahusha doesn't want to dwell with evil. Yahusha can't dwell amongst evil. And I'm going to go into that more when we start our new video series, but he can't dwell where there is uncleanliness. He can't. Otherwise, we will be destroyed. He can't be in that situation because of who he is. He is perfect. He's just like a pure light, a light beam of energy, like it's just cosmic, universal, bigger than universal, because he created the universe. He is. That's why he said, I am. You can't bottle me. You can't say who I am or what deity I'm like or related to. Just tell them I'm Yahuwah and I sent you to deliver you. Do it. Put that in your pipe. So he can't be compared or related. His power is amazing. So we're coming to the end. This will probably be the last video, maybe the second last if I ramble on too much, but we're coming to the end now. We saw that after the fall of mankind, there was a plan. Yahusha, and that's why I've called him Yahusha through this translation, because he is Yahusha. Yahuwah is our deliverance. Yahuwah stepped straight into deliverance mode as Yahusha started delivering us, brought in the idea of blood, brought in the animal sacrifices, then he brought in the circumcision, human, shed flesh, blood sacrifice from humans, so we have to get involved, the blood sacrifice there. And so the whole point was to teach them about blood. And the interesting thing is, the first time he lifts up a covenant, an everlasting blood covenant of deliverance, the first time he lifts it up, raises it up with Abram, one of the first things he says to him is, your people, your descendants are going to be living in a land that's not their own, and they'll be slaves in that land. But after a certain amount of time, I'm going to deliver them and bring them back to this promised land. Because remember, Abraham's promises and from Yahusha were all about the land. He was a king without a kingdom. He had just as much more people than most of the kings in the land of Canaan, in all the cities, and yet he had no land. But he'd been promised land. And one of the first times Yahusha speaks to him, one of them, and definitely the first time he lifted up the covenant with him, was about the fact that your people will be in slavery. And at the end of this book, what are we seeing? In our last video that we saw, Yisharal has just gone to Egypt. Nervously, he was nervous to leave Canaan because that's where he thought his protection and, that's his path, his promised land of his fathers, Yitzhak and Abraham. I have to stay in this land. But Yusuf's alive. I have to go and see Yusuf. So he took all his clans and all his people into the land of Egypt. So this prophecy is coming true, what Yahusha said to Abram. Your people will be slaves in Egypt. And he would have remembered that too. He would have been like, don't really want to become slaves. But as we see, that doesn't happen for a while. So even just in this one book of Genesis, and that's not even including the whole 66 books and the span of time that we can look back with in perspective of what Yahusha did. Even just in this one little book of Bereshith, we can see that not only does Yahusha keep his promises and looks after his people, but the theme, the thrust of this book is, if I'm going to have a marriage home and I'm going to restore it, I need someone to put in it. I can't have a marriage home without a marriage, and I can't have a marriage without a bride. So the whole point of this is, the thrust of it is Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. And Yaakov, of course, becomes Yisharal and the 12 tribes of Yisharal. The 12 tribes of Yisharal are right through the 66 books of Scripture. They're right through. That's what this book is about, the 12 tribes of Yisharal, because that's the only people he made a covenant with. Even to this day, guys, I'm sorry if you're in some wacky, freaky denomination, but he only made a covenant with the 12 tribes of Yisrael. And so, even in the book of Revelation, he's wrapping things up and tying up all the loose threads of the scriptures, and he's talking about the 12 tribes of Yisrael, the covenant he's made with them. And he switches a few of the names. We're not going to go into that right now. Some of the tribes are shifted out and pushed out, and other tribes are put in. But there's 12 tribes. 12. So we're going to go into our last area now, where Yisharal has just gone to Egypt and he's on his deathbed. So, and it's very important, particularly in this day and age, it's very important. It was very important to get the final words from your father before he died, to have him speak over you, to say something to you. Not only reassurance of blessing, but also prophetic, particularly if they're flying with Yahusha, prophetic, what might happen with your life. So when we go into these prophecies, remember that Yisharal, Yaakov, did not know he was speaking grand words of prophecy to the end of the age, the end of the earth. He was simply probably looking into when he was talking, he was probably just thinking the next few hundred years, of them being in Egypt and being taken out of Egypt, and as they were promised. He wasn't looking at it he didn't know he was saying such grand words of wisdom of what these tribes would become, particularly 2 or 3 of them. So just remember that. He was living in the natural, but flowing with Yahusha clearly, because Yahusha has just done some phenomenal things here. Anyway, let's go on. We've gone, where did we come from? We ended our last video with that little map there. And Yisharal asked his son Yusuf not to bury him here in Egypt, but take me back to the promised land to be with my fathers. Bury me with my ancestors. Of course I will, father, Yusuf said. Swear it, Yisharal insisted. So Yusuf gave his oath, and Yisharal bowed humbly at the head of his bed. And then we come to the firstborn blessing. And we're going to see now Yaakov's last words, not only over Yusuf and his 2 sons, but the 12 tribes of Yisharal all get a word in. Let's go. The firstborn blessing. Not long after this, word came to Yusuf, your father is on his way out. So Yusuf went to visit his father, and he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And when they arrived, Yisharal was told, "Your son Yusuf has come to see you." So Yisharal gathered his strength and sat up in his bed, saying to Yusuf, 𝗂𝙴𝙰𝚎 appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, saying to me, "I will make you fruitful and I will multiply your descendants. I will make you an assembly of nations." Very important, that phrase there, assembly of nations. "And I will give this land of Canaan to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession." Everlasting, that implies there's no end, doesn't it? Everlasting, eternal, everlasting. So, assembly of nations. Remember a few videos ago we talked about the assembly of nations? Yisharal is the only man who only had Hebrews. He didn't produce any goyim, any nations, pagan nations, remember? And that's why the assembly of nations is the 12 tribes of Yisharal. Let's just cut to the chase. The assembly of nations is the 12 tribes of Yisharal, and they'll be a blessing to the whole world. ◓ I'll said that. Great, let's move on. "And I'll give this land of Canaan to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession." So now Yusuf, I'm adopting these 2 boys of yours, Ephraim and Manasseh, as my own sons, just as Reuben and Shimei are, and including them in the promises given to me. "But any children born to you in the future will be yours, and they will inherit land within the territories of their brothers, Ephraim and Manasseh." So this isn't just symbolic or figuratively. He literally adopted Yusuf's 2 sons, put them into his tribe. So technically at this point you could say there are 14 tribes, because Yusuf had 12 sons, and now he's just adopted Yusuf's, not just spiritually or figuratively, metaphorically, all these iflies. He literally adopted. He said, "I am adopting these 2 boys of yours, Ephraim and Manasseh, as my own sons, just as Reuben and Shimei are." They were the 2 older kids. Just as they are, these 2 boys are. They're mine now. They're mine. I'm adopting them, including them in the promises given to me. "But any child born to you in the future will be yours, and they will inherit land within the territories of their brothers, Ephraim and Manasseh. Long ago, as I was returning," let's go up a bit. "Long ago, as I was returning from Padan Aram, my beautiful Rachel died in the land of Canaan, while we were still some distance from Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. So with great sorrow I buried her there beside the road to Ephrath. Then Yisharal looked over at the 2 boys." Why did he just suddenly tell him that? I was thinking that, what's he rambling on about his dead wife for now when he's talking about the sons? Because this little family here, Benjamin wasn't in the room, but this little family here of Yusuf and his 2 sons, who he's just adopted, their mother was Rachel. So he's telling them about their mother. Simple. The association is there. "So I buried my beautiful Rachel." He's telling them what happened. Yisharal looked over at the 2 boys. "Are these your sons?" he asked. "Yes," Yusuf told him. "These are the sons Yahuwah has given me here in Egypt." And Yisharal, who was almost blind by this stage, said, "Bring them closer to me so I can bless them." So Yusuf brought the boys close to him, and Yisharal kissed them and embraced them, before saying to Yusuf, "I never thought I would ever see your face again, but now Yahuwah has even let me see your children too." And Yusuf moved the boys, who were at their grandfather's knees, and he bowed with his face to the ground. Then he positioned the 2 boys in front of his father, helping Yisharal by directing Ephraim towards Yisrael's left hand and Manasseh towards his right hand. Because when you're blessing your children, the right hand was the hand for the firstborn blessing. Remember, the whole firstborn and blessing is very important to get the right hand and the right son, as we've discovered too. The right hand was the hand for the firstborn blessing. So the right hand, obviously, would go to the oldest son, which was Manasseh. And at the last moment, so he's going to put his hand out on the kids' heads to bless them. And at the last moment, he crosses his hands. Something sneaky. So at the last moment, Yisharal crossed his hands over as he reached out to lay his hands on the boys' heads, laying his right hand on the head of Ephraim. So he puts his right hand on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger boy, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, though he was actually the firstborn. Then he blessed Yusuf, and of course Yusuf's bowing his head to the ground, so he doesn't see this happening. Then he blessed Yusuf and said, "May Yahuwah, the Elohim, who has fed me all my life and has been my shepherd to this very day, the Elohim of my grandfather Abraham and my father Yitzchak, who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys, preserving my name and the names of Abraham and Yitzchak, and may their descendants multiply greatly throughout the earth." That's a pretty phenomenal blessing over his sons. But when Yusuf looked up and saw that his father had placed his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was upset and went to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head, instead of saying, no, Dad, this one's the firstborn. You've got your hands mixed up. Silly old kid. Come on, Dad. You mixed them up. But Yisharal knew what he was doing and refused. "It's all right, my son. I know. Manasseh will become a great people too, but his younger brother will become even greater, and his descendants will become the completeness of the nations." So we had an assembly of nations. Now the completeness of the nations is going to be Ephraim, the completeness of the nations. Some versions say fullness of the nation, completeness of the nations. So Yisharal blessed the boys that day with this blessing: "The people of Yisharal will use your names instead of Yusuf's when they give a blessing, saying, may Yahuwah make you as prosperous and blessed as Ephraim and Manasseh." And by saying this, Yisharal actually put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. So did Yaqub, Yisharal, now have 14 sons? No, because he, as he said here, the people of Yisrael will use your names when they give a blessing. So he's actually taken Yusuf out of his will, I guess you could say, out of his firstborn blessings. He's taken Yusuf out. So there are not 14 tribes because he's taken Yusuf out. So now there's 13. And in a few hundred years, when the children of Yisrael go into the wilderness, the tribe of Levi, will be taken out of the blessings as well, because they become the priesthood. So there are only 12 tribes all the way through. Levi gets taken out, Lewi gets taken out as the priesthood, and Yusuf gets taken out because his sons replace him. And the interesting thing here about the firstborn, remember the firstborn got a double portion. I mean, all the sons, all the father's wealth was divided up between the 12 sons, but the firstborn son got a double portion. Remember we studied that? Got a double portion. So instead of Yusuf, because Reuben was booted out for his disgusting behavior, instead of Yusuf getting a double portion, his double portion was given to his two sons. So his sons got equal parts of the double portion. So his sons got the equal amount with the other brothers, pretty much. Very interesting, isn't it? The way it goes down. And and see, this is why it's so phenomenal, what's happening here, because Yaqub was just completely blowing up the whole tradition. Not only is he crossing his hands, and which has been done before, though by deception, by Yaqub himself, we see a lot of times the younger son getting blessed higher than the older son. And this is a principle that goes on, the older brother and the younger brother, Yisharal and Ephraim. So the younger son got blessed ahead of the older son. And so Yaqub's crossing his hands. So the phenomenal thing that Yaqub is actually doing here, blowing all the traditions out of proportion, giving the younger one the blessings, the bigger blessing instead of the older one. He's also, remember the firstborn was supposed to get both the birthright, which was the authority, and the blessing, which was a double portion of the wealth. So he's given the double portion of the wealth to Yusuf, or more specifically his two sons. But he didn't give Yusuf or his sons the birthright. That birthright is going to go to Yehuda to carry on the royal line. So, but we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. But I'm just saying here that this was a phenomenal little monologue speech giving out the blessing, because it wasn't done like this. The eldest got the birthright and the blessing, and he's crossed his arms over. He's which has done something very prophetic, because Ephraim, after the later on, when the 12 tribes of Yisharal have a bit of a civil war and they split into two houses, Ephraim becomes the most predominant, biggest tribe, the most dominant tribe. In fact, he becomes so big that Yisharal doesn't get called Yisrael anymore, it gets just called Ephraim, because most of the tribe is Ephraimites anyway. So then you've got Yehuda, who split from Yisharal, and Yisrael, which becomes Ephraim. So, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. But I'm just saying, we're going somewhere with this story. Right now, we're just establishing these 12 tribes, and we've had one son who just dropped out, Yusuf, and two sons that are coming in his place. But later on, we're going to get Levi dropped out, so it still stays 12. Did any of that cosmic explanation make sense? I hope so. It's very exciting, guys. Yaqub had 2 legal wives, so he also had 2 firstborns, Reuben from Leah and Yusuf from Rachel. But since Reuben had slept with his father's servant wife, he'd been disowned, leaving only Yusuf to inherit the birthright and the blessing. But here, Yaqub divides Yusuf's firstborn inheritance between his 2 sons by adopting them into his family's promises. Yes, these 2 boys born outside the covenant and raised in a pagan culture were not only allowed to pass through, which is what what Hebrew means, pass through. They were not only allowed to pass through and graft into the nation of Yisrael and the eternal blood covenant, taking equal importance with the rest of Yaqub's sons, but later Ephraim would become the most powerful of the northern tribes. So even that statement there in the turquoise is phenomenal, because if you want to look at this in the natural, which we shouldn't, but even if you want to look at it in the natural and say, well, if Yahusha's only made blood covenant with the 12 tribes of Yisrael, the Jewish people generally know which tribe they came from. It's Yehuda or Benjamin or but a lot of some Ephraimites have come forward and said we're from that lineage. Where do we stand, guys? Can we not be in covenant because we don't know what tribe we're from? We might be from the nations. I've got Scottish blood in me, and that comes from one of the tribes. But, I don't know. How do we know if we're in the tribes of Yisrael or if we're part of the pagan nations? That's the whole point here. We shouldn't be looking at this in the natural. People who talk about race and colour and skin tone, and the only time I talk about skin tone in these videos is to tell you that most of these characters were black, because we've been so brainwashed to thinking in all the Hollywood movies that they had white skin. That's the only reason I talk about race normally, is to say these guys were black, but with dark skin. But otherwise, it doesn't matter, because this is all... I'm not saying Yisharal is a spiritual thing. There's no spiritual Israel. No, it's not like that. But as we saw here, Ephraim was born outside the covenant. He wasn't born a Hebrew, but he was allowed to graft in. And that's the whole point of what I want to say about this paragraph. It doesn't matter if you're part of the pagan nations, because the 10 tribes of Ephraim were scattered into the nations, into Babylonian, into Assyrian captivity. None of us knew who we were when we were born, when we grew up with all the pagan festivals and pagan culture. We all had to come out if we've been called. We've come out of that culture and we've been grafted in. Just like you graft things into a vine or into a plant, grafted in, and you tape them up and they grow into the root, they grow into the vine. Yahusha is the vine. So the whole point of this is, while it's interesting to look at things in the natural and lineages, and it's fascinating, the whole point today in the 21st century is it doesn't matter who you are. Everybody is invited to the wedding feast if they are willing to graft in and they have their heart circumcised. Remember, when in the time of Abraham, even the outsiders, Hagar and the Egyptian, the people, the mixed multitude that followed him, they were welcome to join into the covenant, the blood covenant of deliverance, if they got circumcised. Well, the circumcision today is of the heart. So if you're willing to be immersed in the mighty, wonderful name of Yahusha, have your heart circumcised, and he gives us a love for his instructions. And if you're willing to do that, then it doesn't matter what tribe you're from, guys, because how hard would that be anyway, to trace back thousands and thousands of years what tribe you're from? And who could be bothered? So it's not about that these days. I'm not saying it's because of a replacement theology thing or a spiritual Israel or all that rubbish they go on with. I'm just saying Yisharal is in the natural. Israel in the Middle East today has got nothing to do with what's going on, what we're talking about here. They're all mad. It's one of the, gay capitals of the world now. It's just a nation of debauchery, and you've got the Jewish people in there trying to do stuff, and the Muslims in there trying to do stuff, and it's all a shim-sham. We know the earth's going to be burnt up, all right? So this very well might turn into 2 videos, guys. I'm rambling a bit today, but I just wanted to let you see that all this means something. Even in the book of Genesis, we're still in the first book, and we can still see that all this makes sense today in the 21st century. All this stuff has happened. Ephraim was raised up as one of the mightiest tribes, even though he wasn't one of the 12 tribes of Yisrael. But Yisharal adopted him as one of his sons, as well as his brother. I think we've said enough about that now. Then Yisharal said to Yusuf, "My wonderful boy, I'm about to die. But remember, Yahuwah will always be with you and will take you back to Canaan, to the land of our fathers. And aside from what I'm giving your brothers, I am giving you an extra portion of the land that I took from the Amorites with my sword and bow." So he's reiterating again this promise given to Abram. And also the promise that Yahusha said to him when he was, in our last video, when he was apprehensive to go to Egypt. "Don't worry, my son, go to Egypt and see your son. I will lead you into Egypt, and I will come and lead you out again." I will. And as we know, his promises are true. He doesn't, his word never comes back void. It always sets out to achieve what he says it will achieve. So if he says it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Not in our time. It might take 10, 20, 100, 300, 5, umpteen years. So it's in his time. So we're coming into the 12 tribes of Yisharal and Yisharal's last words to his sons. So there's the 12 tribes there. They're not in age order because they're in the order of that chart I had before. But these are the 12 tribes. And Yusuf, as you can see, has been replaced, or in brackets, with Ephraim, because Ephraim became the dominant tribe. So, and Manasseh became a tribe in place of Louis, because Louis got taken out as soon as Musha comes along, because Musha was born from the tribe of Louis, and so was his brother Aaron, obviously. And Louis became the priesthood to serve the tabernacle, so Yahusha could be with his people. That's what this is all about, guys. Yahusha wants to be with his people. He's chosen his people now, just like he's chosen them today. He knows who they are. He's chosen his people, and now he needs to teach them, because the first time they blew it because they didn't appreciate his presence clearly. Adam and Ḥawwa didn't fight hard enough to keep his presence in the garden. They just, yeah, we'll get involved with that. What's Shaitan doing? What's he whispering to me? Didn't even fight it, So he's giving his bride some experiences now in the world, which we all need to have, I believe. You can't be delivered from evil if you don't know what evil is, do you? I'm not saying you have to experience every form of evil there is, but what are you delivered from? Or are you just having a religious experience? No, deliverance means you're delivered from something evil, the clutches of unclean spirits, the possession of it, the horrible behaviour, the sleepless nights, the depravity of what unclean spirits want you in. The enemy wants you in. You are delivered from that. There is a deliverance. That's what deliverance is. So Yisharal's last words to his sons. And this is just as much a blowout as everything else, guys. Let's go. Then Yisharal called together all his sons and said, Gather around me, my sons. It's time I told you what you can all expect in the future. Come and listen, all you sons of Yaqub, and listen to Yisharal, your father. So he's embracing both his names here. Reuben. He starts with the eldest. Reuben, you were my firstborn, my strength, the son I had in my youth. You were to be my right hand, the first in all excellency and power. I had such high hopes for you, my son, but your behaviour has always been like boiling water, impatiently furious. You even had sex with my own wife while I was away, just to get a leg up on this inheritance thing you wanted so badly. You hated me so much that you defiled my own marriage bed. And so here is your blessing, my son. Nothing. Nada. Zip. How would he have felt? Tried to take the firstborn blessing by sleeping with his father's servant wife, and it backfired. He got nothing. And interesting, nothing ever from the tribe of Reuben, nothing ever good came from that tribe. No kings, priests, prophets, no nothing, no war heroes, no mighty, nothing good ever came from the tribe of Reuben. So there was a long-term prophecy over that really too. Shimeon and Louis. This is son number 2 and 3. You are both just as bad, always wanting to start a fight and have bloodshed. And I want nothing to do with your violent behaviour. In fact, I'm so happy I won't have to be around to see your ferocious cruelty or hear about who you've murdered in cold blood or what animals you've injured for your own sick pleasures. He's so happy he won't have to be around it because he'll be dead. This is Shimeon and Louis, the two that went on the bloodbath in Shechem, avenging their sister Dinah when she was raped. Remember these two? So he's fed up with them. He's so happy he won't have to be around there. They even tortured animals. They were just bloodthirsty, these two. And animals are a big part of, just as today, animals are a big part of their culture, of their livelihood. I curse both of you for your wicked vendettas and for your fits of rage, and both of you will be divided from Yaqub and scattered throughout Yisharal. Now, it wasn't until I started studying Exodus that I realised that that little sentence there actually comes to fruition quite quickly. Both of you will be divided from Yaqub and scattered throughout Yisharal. Because, and especially Louis, the tribe of Louis, after the golden calf incident, the tribe of Louis are the only one who stands by Musha and repents and says, "Yep, we did it. We're sorry. Please forgive us for." They repent, and so they are separated, divided from Yaqub's. Yaqub is Yisharal. Yisharal is Yaqub. So they're divided from all the other tribes of Yisrael, brought forward, and they are made priests. And what was a priest's predominant job to do? Slaughter, bloodshed, sacrifices, animals. So Yahusha, and we'll go into this more in the next lot of videos, but Yahusha turns every negative into a positive. This tribe, this son here who was bloodshed, bloodthirsty, always dealing with blood, tribe Louis, they become the tribe of priests who are in charge of bloodshed. Only instead of it being disobedient, horrible behaviour, it's a behaviour of obedience to bring cleanliness to the camp. So funny about that. And later on, they're not included when they don't get any land when they get to the promised land either. Hundreds and hundreds of years later, they don't get any land either. So they are scattered throughout they get land scattered. Their land is scattered amongst all the other tribes. They get scattered amongst them, and that's where they live later on. So this is just a little prophecy here of that happening. You will be divided from Yaqub and scattered throughout Yisrael. I thought that was fascinating. Here we go. Son number 4. Remember Yehuda? He went off and had his own 3 bastard sons. Not bastard sons, but unclean sons, because they were not from the line of Shem. And 2 of them were struck down. for their behaviour, and then Tamar went and ended up hiding her face, pretending she was a prostitute, and slept with Yehuda. That was 2 years ago, to get her son, to get her inheritance, her promise. And this is how the bloodline continues through Yehuda. None of his sons were clean, but Tamar's son was. So Yehuda. Of course, Yehuda's also the one that fights for Benjamin too, in front of Yusuf, before they knew who he was. So Yehuda's had a big learning curve, big experience, and a big change of heart, and so he gets blessed for it. Yehuda, your brothers will praise you while you hold your enemies by their throat. All of your brothers' descendants will bow down before you. Yehuda, my son, you are like a lion, a young lion, that has finished killing its prey. Yes, like a lion he crouches and lies down. And who dares mess with this mighty king? If you've grown up in any kind of religion, you remember all the songs about the Lion of Judah? He's the Lion of Judah, yeah? Yehuda, his tribe is associated with the lion, and so is Yahusha, of course. When Yahusha comes back, he's not coming back as a humble servant, a spotless lamb. He's coming back as a roaring lion to devour all the wickedness in this earth with fire and reapers. So it's not going to be pleasant. It's going to be like a horror movie. So who dares mess with this mighty king? The scepter. Remember his scepter that he gave to Tamar? Remember his seal and scepter that he gave, and he lost it for a while there and thought he'd lost it? Whether she gave it back to him or not, I assume she did, but this scepter, the scepter wasn't lost. He hadn't lost his way. He thought he'd lost his way, thought he'd lost everything. He hadn't lost it. He's back. The scepter and royal bloodline will not depart from Yehuda, nor the Creator's instructions from his descendants, until the deliverer himself comes, the one who all nations will obey. Some translations say until Shiloh comes. Shiloh was an actual place where the Ark of the Covenant eventually rested when they went into the Promised Land. But most with half a clue, agree that Shiloh was just referring to, it's like a code word for Messiah. So we're making this translation easy. Make it easy, Mark. So we have, the scepter and royal bloodline will not depart from Yehuda. This is like the firstborn birthright. The scepter and royal blood, he's giving this tribe, this man, authority over all the tribes. He didn't give that authority to Yusuf's 2 sons. He gave them a double portion of the blessing. The authority of the tribes he's giving to Yehuda. The scepter and royal bloodline will not depart from Yehuda, nor the Creator's instructions from his descendants, until the deliverer comes, the one who all nations will obey. He will bear the burden of lawlessness on his back like a donkey, and be tied as a sacrifice to the vine tree, where the blood of the choicest rich grapes will flow. And though their wickedness be red as scarlet, he, being pressed like the darkest wine, shall cleanse them all whiter than milk. How beautiful is that? Could there be a better depiction of what Messiah Yahusha did for us? Though our wickedness is red like scarlet, he being pressed like the darkest wine. And how much pressing and stomping and treading on to press grapes do you have to get the darkest, choicest wine? He was pressed like that for us. Have any of us ever felt stressed to the point where drops of blood came out of our pores, where we sweated blood? Have any of us reached that kind of pressure in our life? Oh, we've had a hard life. Oh, we've felt pressure. Oh, we've had pain and persecution. Oh, yeah. Have you ever sweated blood? Anticipating what was coming? Anticipating the kind of torture you would have to go through? But he was the second Adam, and he wasn't going to fail. First Adam failed. He was the second Adam. Lawlessness and evil came into the world through the first Adam, and lawlessness and evil was booted out legally. I'm not going to go into the whole legally thing, because that's a big theme of the Exodus books that suddenly dawned on me. The whole idea of us being clean legally none of us, we don't feel clean. We still have horrible behaviours and bad habits in us. But as far as he's concerned, we're clean. I'm going to go into that another time, about the whole legality of it. So that was Yehuda. That's a pretty long spiel for Yehuda. He got quite a good blessing there, didn't he? So through him we find out and we know that King Daud and Messiah Yahusha come through his bloodline. Clean bloodline. And that's why Tamar was such an amazing woman, that she held on to her promises. Most of these other sons just get sort of, I mean, I didn't find most of these exciting. If you know much about the history of the tribes, you might know that some of these things happened. But Zebulun, you will settle by the seashore and be a safe harbour for ships, and your borders will extend all the way to Sidon. Issachar, you are one tough, sturdy donkey, mate. You are a tough, sturdy donkey, mate. Resting between two burdens, and when you see how good the countryside is and how pleasant the land, you will incline your shoulders to the load and submit yourself to hard slave labour. Dan, you rightly rule your people like any other tribe of Yisharal, but you will become a serpent beside the road, a poisonous viper along the path that bites the horse's hooves, so its rider falls off. But I trust in Yahuwah for your deliverance. Interesting side note there, when you look at the 12 tribes of Yisrael in the book of Revelation, Dan's missing. There's been a bit of a switcheroo going on there. I forget all the switcheroo, we'll look at it later, but Dan's missing. And Dan was also one of out of all the 12 tribes, Dan was the one that really got under Yahusha's skin, because he was the most idolatrous, idol-worshipping people that were in the tribe of Dan later on. Interesting. Gad, you will be ambushed by savage warriors, but you will attack them when they retreat like cowards. Great, thanks, Dad. Asher, you will dine on rich foods and produce recipes fit for kings. That's a cool one. Thank you, Father. I'm going to be a chef. You will dine on rich foods and produce recipes fit for the kings. Naphtali, you are a deer set free that gives beautiful words of elegance. And of course, Yusuf, you are a fruitful tree beside a fountain with your branches reaching over the walls. Savage archers will attack you, shooting and harassing you, but your bow will remain strong and your arms strengthened by the hands of the mighty one of Yaakov, by the shepherd, the rock of Yisharal. Of course, it's Yahusha. May Yahuwah, the Elohim of your fathers, help you. May the Almighty bless you with the blessings from above and blessings of the watery depths below and blessings of the breasts and womb. May my fatherly blessings on you surpass the blessings of my ancestors, reaching to the heights of the eternal hills. May these blessings rest on your head, Yusuf, for though you were separated from them, you are now a prince among your brothers. And he literally is the prince of Egypt. He's second in charge to the Pharaoh. So though you were separated from them, taken, abused, tortured, a slave, look what happened, and we just went through videos about Yusuf's life. He was the picture of Messiah. He didn't complain, went through it, and now he's been raised up as a prince among your brothers. Benjamin, you are a ravenous wolf, devouring your enemies in the morning and dividing what's left in the evening. You're a ravenous wolf, devouring your enemies in the morning and dividing what's left in the evening. Would have thought he had a bit more to say about Benjamin, since he was the second favourite son. Anyway, these are the 12 tribes of Yisrael, and this is what their father said as he said goodbye to his sons. He blessed, or cursed, each one with a fitting message, speaking over all their futures according to how they behaved in their life within his family. Their blessings, future blessings, eternal blessings, blessings, were based on how they behaved in their life within his family. As it is with us, our rewards, our eternal rewards, our feelings, blessings, lifestyle, everything we have today and protection today is based on how we behave in our life within Yahusha's family. So Take that seriously, guys. There's messengers recording everything we do and say, even when no one's watching. Then Yisharal instructed them, "Soon I will die and join my father and grandfather. Please don't forget to bury me with them in the cave, in the field of Ephron the Hittite. This is the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, that my grandfather Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite as a permanent burial site." Remember that story where he's bargaining? "I want to buy the land. I don't have any land. I want to buy the land to bury my wife on." And he did. He buried his wife, and he was buried there too. So was Yitzhak. He and his wife Sarah are buried there, as well as my father Yitzhak and his wife Rivkah. And there I buried Leah. So the whole family's in this cave. So please don't forget to bury me there. And when Yisharal had finished blessing and instructing his sons, he drew his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and died. It's been quite a journey with Yaakov, hasn't it? And Yusuf threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then he told the physicians who served him, not the pagan temple priests, but the physicians, to embalm his father's body in order to preserve it for the long journey back to Canaan, because they didn't want to carry a stinking corpse through the hot desert. The reason I've put that in there is because when you see the word embalming, you think, oh, they used to embalm the Egyptians and the pharaohs and stuff to prepare them for the afterlife. It was a pagan practice. But Yusuf didn't get the pagan temple priest to embalm Yaakov. Yusuf didn't get the pagan temple priest to embalm Yaakov. He got the physicians. And they're only embalming him because they had to travel days through the desert, and they didn't want to have a stinking hot corpse, so they embalmed him. So Yisharal was embalmed. This process took the usual 40 days, and the Egyptians mourned his death for 70. When the period of mourning was over, Yusuf went up to the Pharaoh's advisors and said, "Please speak to the Pharaoh for me and tell him that my father made me swear an oath saying, 'Listen, I'm about to die. Take my body back to the land of Canaan and bury me in the tomb I prepared for myself. So please allow me to go and bury my father. After his burial, I promise I will return straight away.'" So remember, he's not a slave, but remember he works for the Pharaoh, so he's kind of got to ask permission. "Can I go and bury my father? And I promise I will come back." Because remember, these people belong in Canaan. They came from Canaan. Yusuf was kidnapped from Canaan. So the Pharaoh could very well be thinking, he's buggering off, he's not coming back. He's going back to his land. So Yusuf has promised the Pharaoh, "Don't worry, I'm coming back." But the Pharaoh agreed and said, "Go and bury your father as he made you promise." But he didn't leave it that simply. He sent all his soldiers and stuff with him, probably to make sure he came back. So Yusuf went up to bury his father. He was accompanied by all the Pharaoh's officials, all the senior members of the Pharaoh's household, and all the senior officers of Egypt, probably to make sure he returned to Egypt and didn't do a runner. Yep. Under the guise of we're mourning and respecting Yaakov, we just want to make sure you come back, mate, because our nation's been blessed because of you. And Yusuf also took his entire household and his brothers and their households too. But they left their little children and flocks and herds in the land of Goshen. A great number of chariots and horsemen accompanied Yusuf. When they arrived at the threshing floor of Atad near the Yarden River, they mourned 7 days for Yisharal. The local residents, the Canaanites, watched them mourning and renamed the place Abel-Mitzrim. For they said, "This is the place of grievous mourning for these Egyptians." Mitzrim, Egyptians. So Yisharal's sons did as he commanded them, carrying his body to the land of Canaan, and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre. This is the cave that Abraham had bought as a permanent burial site from Ephron the Hittite. And after burying Yisharal, Yusuf returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's burial. But now that their father was dead, Yusuf's brothers became fearful. This was interesting. Now that their father was dead, Yusuf's brothers started freaking out. And they said, "Yusuf will show his anger and seek revenge for all the wrong we did to him." Now that our father's dead, Yusuf's going to get us back. So they sent this message to Yusuf. They're cunning, aren't they? Before our father died, he instructed us to tell you. No, he didn't. Please forgive your brothers for the wrongs they did to you and for their evil in treating you so cruelly. So we, servants of the Elohim of our father, beg you to forgive us of our wickedness. They're still not over it. And when Yusuf received the message, he broke down and wept. After everything he's done for them, they still didn't believe him, that he was genuine. Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before him. Look, we are your slaves, they said. But Yusuf said, please don't be afraid of me. Am I Yahuwah, that I can punish you? You wanted to get rid of me, and I don't blame you, for I was a little turd back then. But Yahuwah brought something amazing out of it all. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. So please don't be afraid of me. I will continue to take care of you and your children. And he reassured them. Just as Yahusha was in that position, he went to the stake for the joy. He went to the stake to deliver as many who would have received him. He delivered the whole world legally, but, not many will taste the wedding feast because they don't want him. So please don't be afraid of me. I will continue to take care of you and your children. Yusuf was raised up into that position. And the whole thing of death and resurrection. How many men in these scriptures were symbolically dead, gone through a time of wilderness, testing, trial, deathly experiences, horrific training and torture. How many of these men went through this in order to be lifted up, to be useful by Yahusha? What does that say about our lives? Keep going, brothers and sisters. What you're going through, you're meant to be going through. If it's a consequence for what you've done, face it and keep working through it. But as far as the training goes, keep going through the training. Otherwise, what is there off the path? There's nothing off. You got to go back. You leave the path, you get shot back to where you were. When an unclean spirit, when the spirit of Yahusha leaves, 7 unclean spirits come in its place. Remember the whole strongman story? That's why people who leave Yahusha go nuts. The death of Yusuf. So Yusuf and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt, and Yusuf lived to the age of 110, seeing 3 generations of descendants from his own son Ephraim. And he also lived to see the birth of the children of Manasseh's son Machir, whom he claimed as his own. So Yusuf claimed this son as his own because the only 2 sons that were claimed by Yaqub were Manasseh and Ephraim. All the other sons were Yusuf's. I'm about to die, Yusuf told his brothers, but Yahuwah will surely come back to help you and lead you out of this land of Egypt. He will bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give you. He solemnly promised to give to your He will bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give to you, our fathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaqub. He will surely come back and help you. Then Yusuf made the sons of Yisharal swear an oath, and he said, when Yahuwah comes to help you and lead you back to his promised land of Canaan, you must take my bones with you. So Yusuf died at the age of 110, and the Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was put in a coffin in Egypt. And as we know, when Yahusha finally did deliver them, they took Yusuf's body, or his bones anyway. That was all that was left. So that's it, guys. That's Bereshith. It started with a covenant home, and it was broken, blasted to smithereens. And this was the thing I was thinking too. I wonder why Yahusha waited 2,000 years. It's almost like a dark ages. We don't hear much about it. We dealt with it videos before, but there's almost 2,000 years before the flood, or just over 1,500, or something like that. Why did he wait so long? Who knows? The earth was just getting filthier and filthier and filthier until he decided to wipe it all out and start again with Noach. And then, of course, it's all happening again now. The nations are all the same again, listening to unclean spirits, breeding and interbreeding and worshipping idols and, doing the most depraved, hideous things with themselves and animals and everything else. And in the midst of it all, he's got his Hebrew family, his Hebrew people, nation, that he's just sent into Egypt, into one of the most pagan nations there is. He's sent his Hebrew people into Egypt. And that's where the story ends. But that's exactly what he told Abraham that would happen, isn't it? Abram, your people will be slaves in the land that's not their own. So within the short 50 odd chapters of this first book, he's done what he said he would do. And it's taken about 2,000 years to do it. So this whole book, these last 22 videos or so, have spanned, it will be 22 probably, or 21 videos, have spanned about 2,000 years. And we're setting the scene now. We're laying a foundation. Blood covenant, washing. No, we haven't come to the washing in water yet, but that's in the next book. Blood covenants. It's all about blood in this book. Blood. Blood from the circumcision, foreskins, blood from animals, blood. Everything had to be covered in blood. I'm not going to go into that right now. There's a reason everything had to be covered in blood. It was like an immunity. It was like if you wanted to be in Yahusha's presence, you had to be covered with the blood. So, this is the story so far, the shadow so far. So we started with Adam, Noach, Abram, who had his name changed to Abraham. And then we went the story of Hagar, remember, and Ishmael. So all the nations were born from here. Nations. Abraham had nations, and he had Hebrews, which was Yitzhak. He had all these other nations as well over here. Yitzhak married Rivka. Rivka and Yitzhak had nations, all the nations there, and Hebrews. And Yaqub only had Hebrews. There's no other nations from here on out. Not from this man anyway. This is all Hebrew people. So do you understand this, guys? We had all the blessings given out over the sons. Yusuf's now been dropped out. You can erase him because his two sons have been slotted into this spot here. His Ephraim and Manasseh have been slotted into here. So he's been taken out and his two sons have been put in. So technically there's 13 tribes. However, in about 500 years from now, Louis will be dropped out because he will be the priesthood. So we're back to 12 again. So there's 12 tribes. So it all works. And we also saw that at the same time Yusuf went into slavery, Yehuda went off and had a family of his own. All these half-breeds that didn't surmount to anything. But Tamar, she fought for her promises and she ended up sneakily sleeping with Yehuda and had these sons here. And Peretz was going to carry down here, the bloodline here. So remember when Yaqub gave out his blessings, the firstborn birthright continued. The birthright and the blessings. Remember the firstborn. All this was supposed to go to Reuben. Reuben was the firstborn birthright. This is why it's so phenomenal here, because Yaqub did something totally phenomenal and unprecedented. He just did what he wanted. He crossed his hands over. He split the blessings. He put the birthright onto Yehuda. And of course we know the royal bloodline of the kings and Messiah. And over here, as I just said, he kicked Yusuf, not kicked out. Yusuf already had enough wealth. He was the second in charge of the Pharaoh. He didn't need any wealth. So he kicked his sons out, kicked him out and put his sons in there. And they, Ephraim, continued the blessings. And Ephraim became the most dominant of the northern 10 tribes. If this isn't all gelling completely, these are just laying foundations. We're going to go into much more detail as we go on. So you can see it all started with Adam. 1500, 1600 years later, it was all wiped out. We started again from Noach. A few generations after that, we had Abraham. And all these videos we've been going through has all just been about this one little family here. And how Yahusha wanted his chosen people to recognize, see what he's doing. He's laying down the foundations of the eternal blood covenant. It was always about the blood covenant, remember? There's only one eternal blood covenant. It's still the same blood covenant today. He did it. He raised it up with lots of different men, and there were different signs and seals to do with their deliverance, but It's the same eternal blood covenant. He just lifts it up with different people. Different generations come along and they've forgotten who he is. He raises it up again. So he's raised it up. He hasn't raised it up again today because it was raised up with Yahusha. Yahusha raised it up. He said, this is the renewed blood covenant. I'm raising up the blood covenant again in my blood this time. Remember at the Last Supper? He said, see this bread, see this wine? That's going to be me tomorrow. I'm going to be crushed, beaten, bruised to establish the blood covenant, to buy back my bride. He had to pay the bride price, which was his own life. He offered his own life. So let's we're on an hour. Let's not do another video. Let's finish it here. Let's just whisk through these end notes. I'll try not to add too much. Let's finish it, guys. This book of Bereshith has covered the first 2,200 years of human history, from Adam to Yusuf, and we see the creation of the earth and how the nations were established. It all began with a perfect marriage relationship in a safe, protected home. But from the moment the enemy appeared and mankind chose to disobey, Yahusha was already in deliverance mode, raising up his eternal blood covenant and offering favour and protection for clean, obedient behaviour. Mankind's constant disobedience and hatred for Yahusha in breaking this covenant agreement is why a flesh and blood Messiah was needed to repair the damage done to the marriage covenant by the enemy. But Yahusha had to prepare men and women for his arrival first and teach them once again how to approach him and behave. So here in Bereshith we see the beginnings of all his shadows. The beginnings of all the shadows and teachings in the form of a blood covenant. Yahusha never made different covenants with different people. He was always renewing the same blood covenant because the blood covenant always revolved his instructions and who he is, and he hasn't changed. I do not change, therefore you're not consumed. Because if he changed his mind, we'd all be wiped out based on our behaviour. He never made different covenants with different people. He was always renewing the same blood covenant over and over to restore his family, tweaking it here and there to remind the next generation, not tweaking it because it needed improvement, tweaking it to be user-friendly to the people, the cultures that he was dealing with at the time. Generations change and things happen. Just like today, we don't need to cut the flesh off our willies. He cuts our hearts. Behavior, the covenant doesn't change. Behaviors change, but the covenant does not change. Instructions do not change. How we behave, we can behave this covenant today in the 21st century. In our 21st century clothes, in our 21st century lives, in our 21st century haircuts, in our 21st century jobs, 21st century families, 21st century babbling lips of the English language or whatever country you're in. 21st century, but the covenant stays the same. Got it? We don't have to go back and live like we're, a Hebrew in this time. The truth comes to us, and we behave it now. Always renewing the same blood covenant over and over to restore his family, tweaking it here and there to remind the next generation about his instructions and behaviour until he himself could arrive and display some incredibly revolutionary behaviour. Remember, revolution just means you taking something back by force or doing something by force, standing against the status quo by force. That's why we're in a behaviour revolution. Our behaviour is to be different, even without saying a word, which is generally the best option these days. Your behaviour is what comes through. In Bereshith, we also see a huge emphasis being put on genetic purity, whether a person or tribe is from a clean bloodline, from Adam or then Noach, or unclean and polluted. So people were either clean from Adam and then Noach, or unclean and polluted, interbred with the nations, or fallen messengers. The difference between Yahusha's chosen people and the nations always came down to obedient behaviour though. Those who guarded his promises and instructions, teaching it to their households, and those who refused to. So blood was important. Just because you came from Noach I mean, they all came from Noach, didn't they? One of Noach's sons, and two of Noach's sons were blessed and one was cursed. So it was all about behaviour. But in Genesis, it's also about blood, because Messiah wants to come through a clean bloodline. Today, not so much about blood, it's about behaviour. The earth in ancient times was full of savage violence, murder, and a wicked lust for sexual perversion. But in the midst of this depravity, just like today, Yahusha searches the planet for those who want him and will obey his instructions of loving kindness. These are his bride, no matter how few, who he will cherish and work alongside until the final restoration of the marriage home is complete. The marriage home still isn't complete. His whole plan was to take them into Egypt, let them infiltrate with the nations, so the nations came out with them, a mixed multitude came out with them to prove what he's saying. Take them to the mountain, give them instructions, the marriage ketubah, marry them, take them to the covenant land, the marriage house, to consummate with them. And who knows, if they'd done it right then and there, Messiah might have come in the flesh then, and who knows what might have happened. But of course, Yisharal dropped the ball, went back into idolatry, and he divorced them, flicked them away, sent them back into the land, into the nations, I should say. You want the nations, you don't want me. You want the pagan nations, you don't want to be restricted by my covenant. Go, have your way. I'm not protecting you. So the whole purpose of this book, the scriptures, is about restoring the marriage home, the bride and the marriage home. So today, those who want his loving kindness and his instructions are his bride, and he will work with us until the final restoration of the marriage home is complete. And we know that marriage home is going to be the new Jerusalem, which will come down from the clouds, and we will also be a part of, because the bride is the marriage home. The marriage home is the bride. The word Hebrew, originally 𝗎𝗑, comes from the man 𝗎𝗑, great-grandson of Shem, Noach's son, and means passing through. Technically, anyone from the line of Shem could be considered a Hebrew person. However, this label didn't come fully into vogue until Yahusha renewed his eternal blood covenant with Abraham. That's why it became popular then, because it was about the blood covenant, about the circumcision. So even though it says technically you could be called a Hebrew if you're from Shem, that's not quite true, because you had to be circumcised in the blood covenant. At this point, being a Hebrew person implied that you were in the circumcised covenant family of Abraham. The word Yisharal, or Yisharalite, soon stepped into focus after Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov died, and Yahusha shifted the focus onto the next generations, the 12 tribes of Yisharal. That's where we're at now. Yaakov's just died, and the focus is now on the 12 tribes of Yisrael and what's going to happen with them. Today we understand that Paleo-Hebrew is the original language that this whole planet spoke until Babel. And there are many nations from the line of Noach who still speak and hold on to its authentic sounds. There's plenty of places you can go, lots of good articles out there that talk about that. A lot of the people in the Middle East and the Muslims and stuff, they have maintained a lot of the right vowel movements, consonants, sounds in their mouth too. That's why we can not necessarily use the names they use, but get understanding of how the Hebrews spoke, because the Hebrews got taken into captivity and taught other languages, and the sounds got taken from them. Whereas a lot of the other nations, even though they weren't covenant people, they kept the language the same, so we can learn from their language. They hold on to the authentic sounds. Yahusha only ever made an eternal blood covenant with Yisharal and no one else. However, we saw many times in this book how the foreigners or outsiders from the Gentile nations were welcome to partake of the covenant promises if they would put away their pagan practices and idols, be grafted into Yisharal and walk in obedience. Just like today. Doesn't matter what bloodline you're from, what tribe, lineage, anything, how old you are, what colour your skin is, doesn't matter. If you are willing to put away pagan lifestyle, be grafted into Yisharal, repent, be immersed in the name of Yahusha, be grafted into the commonwealth of Yisrael, you walk in obedience. There were instructions that needed to be obeyed, and each individual had to bear the sign of the covenant in their flesh in order to be delivered. No matter what bloodline they came from, the sign of the covenant, which was circumcision, that circumcision is now in our heart, and the sign of the everlasting blood covenant, ever since Sinai. I'm jumping the gun, it's right here. Lineage was important here in the beginning of the world, but behaviour was paramount. The sign of the eternal blood covenant today for anyone who will graft into the true vine of Yisharal is to rest on the seventh day Shabbath. And those who choose to be obedient bear this sign in their behaviour. I've just found out some phenomenal stuff about the tabernacle and the Shabbath and how it's... I'm not going to go into it, it's going to take too long, but Yahusha wanted to dwell within the four dimensions of his creation. Time, space, and the Shabbath is time. The tabernacle was the space. That's all I'm going to say for now. Keep tuning in. It's amazing what Yahusha's done. He sanctified, he set apart a special place in this wicked world where he could dwell in a certain time and a certain place. He could only dwell within the tabernacle because it was covered in blood. And he dwelt on the Shabbath. It was his time. He's taking back bit by bit his world. And he'd started with this little part. Anyway, go on. The Shabbath is very important. And you feel, if you do it, you feel I can say the word anointing. It's not a religious word. You feel the anointing if you do it properly and you rest and you relax and you refresh. Feel his presence probably even stronger on that day because it's a day that's set apart and anointed, just like the tabernacle was anointed, just like we're anointed when we behave the right way. The Shabbath is very important. It's the sign, the outward sign in our flesh, in our behaviour of what covenant we're in. The idea of mankind needing to shed blood in order to be in a relationship with their Creator, firstly animal blood, then the blood of their foreskins, finds complete fulfillment in the ultimate sacrifice made by Yahusha when he was born from the royal bloodline of Yehuda, Yisharal's son, and offered his perfect eternal blood as the final offering, not only covering mankind's evil but completely cleansing and legally removing it from the picture, reconnecting the dimensions once more and making available the deep personal connection as was in the Garden of Eden with the tree of life. To anyone who will repent and return to his instructions, the 10 commandments or instructions I should say, the 10 words are the wedding vows of this renewed covenant marriage. Physical circumcision, just in case you're wondering whether we need to be physically circumcised, physical circumcision, once required in order to be in the eternal blood covenant of deliverance with Yahusha, is no longer required in our flesh, for we are indeed washed clean by his shed blood. And upon our immersion in water, the sign of good conscience, Yahusha himself circumcises our hearts with a love for his instructions, giving us the power to live by them in obedience through his set-apart spirit. So the emissaries of Yahusha, I forget which ones, I think it might be Galatians, deals with circumcision and how it's not required. Don't make the adult believers get circumcised. The circumcision now of your flesh. Some people still believe you should be circumcising your children on the eighth day. Why? Why do you need to shed the blood of a human being? Do you go and sacrifice an animal for your newborn child so they're delivered? No. No bloodshed is required anymore, and that was the only reason circumcision came in, because Yahusha said to Abraham, I'm renewing this covenant with you, and mankind is going to get involved. So you realise that there are consequences for evil behaviour. Blood had to be shed, not just the animals now, but your skin as well. The skin of your foreskins, the blood must be shed. Yahusha has fulfilled all that now. Not abolished, fulfilled, breathed life into it. Circumcision is now of our heart. So why would you put your child, your baby through that? Why would you do that? It's completely out of context. You're not understanding what Yahusha did. It would just like going into the birthing ward with your wife, with a little bird, cutting its head off, or a lamb and slaughtering a lamb. Would you do that? But why would you cut the skin off your child? I mean, if it was for hygienic purposes, as it was 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, fine. That's, if it's for hygiene reasons, fine. But as far as this, it's not needed anymore. Yahusha did it all. You're slapping Yahusha in the face by circumcising yourself or your children. You're saying your blood covenant, your blood sacrifice wasn't enough. We've still got to do something. No. The only thing you have to do now is behave yourself and follow Yahusha's instructions. So, just as the men in Scripture often had their names changed after enduring a testing experience with Yahusha, which symbolised a fresh start or a death and resurrection, today those who are willing to be tested, trained and die to themselves will experience true deliverance in overcoming and will be forever changed with different set-apart behaviour to those around them. Yahusha has a plan and he will execute it in his appointed times, which only he knows. By listening to the enemy in disobedience, satisfying the flesh, or even trying to speed up Yahusha's timeline to get things done themselves, we saw many people go through horrendous consequences with resulting chaos, and they needed more time in the wilderness of separation, testing and learning, until they were stripped of their confidence, their ego, their agenda, and they learnt to rely and flow with Yahusha. It's the same for us today, guys. You step out and try to do something of yourself, what happens? Considering none of these men in Bereshith had Yahusha's spirit living inside them, as is today, Noach, Enoch, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov and Yusuf simply had to listen when they heard Yahusha's voice. And they chose to follow, behaving obediently. And because of their belief, their lives were forever changed, and they became our patriarchs in the belief. Men who we can look to, men whose lives were offered up as a witness to us to say, this is what they did wrong and this is what they did right. This is how Yahusha felt about their wrong and their right, and this is how he treated their wrong and their right. This is how he punished and blessed their wrong and their right. So while we don't go and live in the same context that they lived, we learn from their behaviours. That's what this book is about. As I've said so many times, we're not supposed to live the way they lived, eating and drinking and wearing the same fashion and doing the same things they did. We're learning about behaviours that Yahusha loves and behaviours that Yahusha hates, because we want to please him. That's what this book is for. Go back in time, study it, spend as long as you want back there in that time period and immerse yourself in the culture, but eventually you've got to come back to the 21st century, put on your 21st century clothes and behave in a 21st century manner. How does Yahusha want me to behave that will honour and be obedient to him in today's 21st century, without making a mockery of his name, without just being a laughing stock, a mockery, a freakish thing? What's that? Yahusha wasn't a freak when he walked around. That's not why they hated him. He looked like everybody else. He behaved like, he walked and he helped and he loved and he healed. But when it came time to speak out, he spoke the truth, and that's why they hated him. Those who hated him, and those who loved him, loved him. But it wasn't because he was a laughing stock or he had freakish behaviour. It was because he was following a path, and we had to follow a path too of his instructions, his example. How much more precious is it to know our bridegroom Yahusha through a deep and intimate relationship, now that he dwells inside his bride of all lineages across the earth, as he prepares her for his return and the restoration of this planet. When we compare with our patriarchs, there can be no excuses. What would be written about us if Yahusha were to record our life and behaviour? You know he is, don't you? What would the book of Mark look like? What would the book of your life look like? What would that book look like? Abraham, they wrote about Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Yusuf, all the things they did good and bad and right and wrong. What if they were written about us? How would we compare? So we can look down our nose at these two. Oh, I wouldn't do that. What have you done? How's your life going so far? Are we honouring Yahusha within? And we've got Yahusha within us. They didn't. Occasionally he filled them for a specific purpose, but most of the time it was external. He spoke to them, appeared to them. Either we believe and behave accordingly, or we ignore and be destroyed, as we saw in the text. with Noah. The 6,000 years, remember we talked about this? The 120 Jubilee cycles, the Shemitah cycles. 120 Jubilee cycles is almost up. And the great harvest of people and a spectacular wedding feast awaits those who would graft into Yisharal. There's no other place to graft into. Yisharal is the only nation that has a covenant with Yahusha. He's only interested in Yisharal. So if you want to be a part of it, you've got to graft in. If you're an outsider, none of us know who we are anyway. We're probably from Yisrael anyway and don't even know. But even if we're not, we graft into the covenant through immersion in his name. Anyone who would graft into Yisrael through immersion in his name, denying themselves and overcome this world and its ways. The wedding feast is for them. And here we have, and I hope it was pretty obvious going through this, that there are 3 rules, which is a quick summary of behaviour. Bringing the covenant into the 21st century means give us something quick and easy that we can go into our day. I haven't finished reading all the scriptures yet, so how do I behave today? Well, take these 3 rules, because if you're doing these 3 rules, you're doing scripture. And so much, do you know what I'm saying? It's just a practical behaviour. It's not every single thing, it's a behaviour. There's lots of things we can learn into and go into and go back and learn the culture and everything. But look, today in the 21st century, when you go to work, don't take anything personal from anybody. If someone hasn't been chosen by Yahusha, why are you arguing with them, debating with them? If they are chosen, it'll be pretty obvious. And you work with them. Don't take anything they say personally. The whole world is dead. The walking dead. Zombies. Why would you take any of their behaviour personally? Let them have what they want. Let them have. Yahusha does. Are you better than him? He let everybody have it. He worked with specific people, and when it was time to punish them, he punished them. When it was time to speak, he spoke. But he let them have their idolatry. Let them have it. Let them have everything. Hated it, and then eventually destroyed it. But we're not the judge. Let people have what they want to have. You know, don't make excuses for yourself or other people. Don't lie. These are the whole scriptures boiled into 3 simple little rules. So, we've talked about these rules lots of times. Go there. And then we've got the marriage covenant. The marriage vows, I should say. Or the eternal blood covenant. These weren't given until Sinai. However, I believe they were given from Adam. Something on my lip. I believe that they were given from Adam because they were who Yahusha is. They were a reminder at Sinai. They were lifted up as an official civil instruction. I don't like the word law, but they were lifted up as this is the nation and this is the legislation that we're going to live by. Whereas prior to that, they were only taught to people who wanted to be obedient. Now this was you will do this, otherwise you get out, or you're stoned, or you're dead. The marriage vows of the eternal blood covenant. Love Yahusha more than anything else. Do not bow down and worship idols. Always use Yahusha's name. Make it easy, guys. Make it easy. Always use Yahusha's name. Rest on the 7th day Shabbat, which is Saturday, of course. Respect your father and mother. Don't murder, which is also in your words as well. Don't cut people down. Don't murder. Don't break up your marriage. Don't break wedlock or anybody else's. Don't steal or kidnap. That's what the Hebrew word for steal. Don't seize something that's not yours or a person. Don't lie or be cruel. And 10, don't desire after anyone else's stuff. And in the Hebrew, the word covet is not so much oh, I wish I had that. Because we all look at stuff today and go, oh, that'd be nice to have that, wouldn't it? Oh, you're coveting. No, it's not like that. It's making a specific attempt to seize something that's not yours. So it's probably the step before stealing. You know, it's the desire aftering something. Not just looking at something, oh, isn't that stunning? Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's not coveting, that's just observing, and that'd be nice. But to actually, you hone in on it and go, oh yeah, I'm gonna have that. That's coveting, wanting and desiring and being drawn in by. That's coveting. That's what coveting means. Loving, and of course all this is loving behaviour. These instructions were taught from the beginning of time and made official at Mount Sinai. to remind Yahusha's people who they were. So, brothers and sisters, let's go right back up to the top. It all started there. Behaviour Revolution Scriptures. It's been a journey, hasn't it, guys? I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been nearly an hour and a half. I'm not going to ramble on anymore, but keep going. I'm taking a little bit of time off now. I haven't been very well. My throat's, I'm losing my voice again. I've been eating all the wrong foods, not unclean foods, but just sugary foods, because once I get involved in a project, everything else just goes by the wayside. And I've been so caught up in these videos and the scriptures that, you know, I tend to get a bit narrow focused. So I need to spend a bit of time on my health and my family and my business and get into life a bit. So I'm going to take about a month off, and then I've already put 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝕚 up on the Behaviour Evolution page. So if you want to race ahead and read it, you can. Otherwise, in a few weeks, I'll be back and we'll start making videos on the next book, 𝗪𝗪, and that's fantastic. It's a blowout. Amazing where Yahusha goes. He starts stepping out of the shadows a bit, Yahusha. I noticed, even just because I'm doing it in colour, that whenever Yahusha talks, I'm doing it in red, and there's not much red in Genesis. There's little short paragraphs here and there. Yahusha doesn't say a lot. In Exodus, there's pages and pages and pages of red writing. Yahusha's just going to town, telling everybody what he wants. Do this and do that, and tell the Pharaoh this, and it's amazing. With an outstretched arm, they're not going to worship idols, no way. He's stepping up. He's almost like he's standing up off his throne and saying, oh, I'm done with this. And he's going to deliver his people. So stay strong in the deliverance, brothers and sisters. Know what your deliverance is. If you don't know, work out your deliverance with fear and trembling, the scripture says. Know what it is. And I'll be back in a few weeks, guys. I love you, and I'm having a ball doing this, and I hope you're enjoying it too. So be it.